We're coming up to 9 o'clock, and Melanie suggested talking a little bit about the coalition before we wrap. Um,
Yeah, I was well into listening to all of you. Yeah, if you, I would love to talk about the coalition. I just don't know what I'm allowed to say.
well, I'll share what kind of has been going on. So after the trustee elections last fall in Ontario and British Columbia, a handful of people from different organizations came together in discussions late last year and early this about creating a national coalition to broaden the footprint and to make it a big tent. And one of the organizers is, I think at one point he was the head of the BC Green Party, really coming from the NDP left, and he's left the left and has built coalitions before. His name's Stuart Parker. And then we have people, kind of contributing from more traditional, religious Christian frameworks and traditional other traditional frameworks. And the idea was to let's focus in on a couple of things that we can agree on around the issue of gender, and let's bring a bunch of people, like executive from these different organizations, together around a table. Um, you know, um, Virtually speaking, to be able to sign on to press releases and endorse certain activities together, and broaden the footprint so that we can broaden the impact. Because right now we have all kinds of small groups trying to organize themselves. They have management problems, they have growth problems, they have communication problems, and a larger coalition can help to resource some of those smaller organizations with various types of best practice sharing and things like that. But the coalition came, or the idea of coalition again surfaced with the Million Person March idea that came out of a Muslim man here in Ottawa, and his joining a protest and organizing some things in June. And he was talking what sounded like good words. In the last 6 or 8 weeks about a national coalition for this Million Person March, and there's been some, when any time organizations come together, there can different groups of people, there can be frictions and misunderstandings and different versions of how things should unfold, and so there has been some distance between this organizer and I think a lot of other groups. He's lost a fair amount of support. Not to say that people wouldn't fully coalesce again around the Million Person March. I certainly think it's September 20th is the date. We can't unring the bell that this is an event date across the country. Organizations of people from all over Canada are asking about it. So what we're doing now was what I proposed early in the conversations with Kamel, that we create a policy document or a position statement that we aim to be um, um, lofty enough that we could get people from all different organizations to sign on to, from traditional Christian organizations, Muslim organizations, even unto the LGB Alliance Canada and the Gender Dysphoria Alliance Group and things like that, so that we can demonstrate that we put aside our differences, we're going to communicate together, we're going to each respectively use our networks to raise the profile of September the 20th, under that framework of principles. So we're at that point right now. We're circulating a draft document to get feedback from different organizations on whether they can sign on, whether there are sticking points, and then we'll start, hopefully in the next week or so, some press releases around like the numbers behind the coalition and the different groups. And we've got people committed to building websites and some numerous organizations that are going to host kind of like a playbill page on their web pages about events and organizers and who to contact and how to participate in September 20th across Canada. So um, I think in some ways it's going to be shepherded. I don't think anyone's going to, march to a drummer. And in some ways, it's going to be very organic. People are going to do their own thing on September 20th, and all of that I think is great. Um, and
And dates around it. It's not. I mean, some people have been organizing around different dates as well.
mhm.
Yeah.
September 14th is another one that a U.S. organizer proposed for an International Day of Walkout, and he's organizing in the States. And there's actions on the 22nd in Toronto. Billboard Chris and Josh Alexander are reuniting. And then there's, like, just in Windsor that week, I think there's 4 events.
Yeah.
Um, and what we experienced was the individual, Camille Al-Sheikh, I think believed that he needed to control everything and not recognizing how much of a contribution people were making across the country from different groups and how long people have been invested in this. I think we're at a brush fire level. Like the tinder is dry. People are ready to take action. There's a lot of momentum, and like all you have to do is put you know catalyze this by saying, okay, everybody, September 20th, and
Yeah.
it's gonna take on a life of its own.
I think the rising unemployment we're about to see will also catalyze this.
Yeah, you may be right.
Is
Possibly.
is there a political strategy tied to it? I don't mean like partisan politics. I mean like is a coalition. I don't even know what the terminology would be to like petition Queens Park. This is primarily around a combination of like education and policy related to gender treatment. Is it?
Uh,
Is
it's school focused, but the larger ask has to do with health policy and um, our what's instantiated in law around gender identity. We
I can
need.
I can speak a little bit about it. I don't. So the coalition itself is not doing what you're suggesting, Alex, but groups within the coalition are working on lots of different things. And I think right now the coalition is very focused on these protests because that's sort of what catalyzed everything. But it will go forward. It's not just about the 20th. It's really about getting people together, working together on this gender issue to do with children in schools. And so I think as the protests pass, as the I guess March season passes, then all there'll be a lot more knowledge sharing between the groups. So, for example, Our Duty Canada has been doing an awful lot of letter writing, getting very much involved in getting in contact with their local MPs and things like that. And I'm sure other groups have been also doing a lot of things. So there'll probably be a lot more communication. But right now, it's really focused on the march.
Mhm. Okay, so to support then, who should we be following, or what site should we be looking at, or like is it about coming out? I've heard of the event happening on the 20th, the one in Toronto. I'm thinking of Victoria Park Collegiate, I think. Um, so what advice would you have to those of us who want to support that in some way?
At the moment, it's kind of like saves the date and stay tuned.
Hmm. Hmm.
We know that there will be organizers in major cities across the country. At the provincial legislatures, Pierre Barnes out of Vancouver announced their location, time, and March today for the 20th. We expect kind of local leaders will come forward and organize, and they'll be from different institutions and organizations and things like that. I can tell you right now, I got word last night from someone I know who has um, let's say a high level of connections in conservative politics in Canada, and he had a conversation in person with Pierre Poilievre on Sunday night. And Pierre Poilievre knows what's going on about the Million Person March, and is asking questions about it, and is asking questions about parental rights. And he's digging. And tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with a conservative MP who's building the file on this issue. I know a half a dozen people personally who they've interviewed based on their different perspectives and the organizations that they're with to get perspective on the file. And I'm also expecting tomorrow, because some of you may know, well, it's pinned on my Twitter, that I am the executive director of a AI research project. And we're advised by like Lisa Littman, who coined the term ROGD, and Lisa Marciano, who wrote about social contagion like 2015, 2016. Some policy and legal people from the U.S. and others, and we have the largest independent, statistically valid samples of trans-identified men and trans-identified women on Twitter in the world. And
I cannot wait to read that.
I get the first peek tomorrow morning in our conversation with the Conservative MP, because the chief technology officer and founder of the AI company is going to break news. So I can't wait to talk about it. And we've already seen, like Manitoba and Saskatchewan change their policies and really take a step on that this week.
Yeah, that was really great news today when I saw that. That's some really positive stuff.
Caucus advisor to Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
He and I communicate occasionally, and an organizer in New Brunswick who can be a kingmaker when there's an election. She has a really good mailing list and over 3,000 signatories in New Brunswick now on the issue. So we can see it moving, and it's not going to be the efforts of one person. It's not going to be the efforts of one group. It's not going to be the outcome of one day. But we're moving collective consciousness and public awareness, and motivating people on a broad scale to talk about this with their families. Like, people are talking about gender issues in school and education, at the summer barbecues and at weddings, and that and now that people perceive that they have permission to talk about these things and scratch their head and say, why the hell is Ann Andres winning women's powerlifting championships? It's ridiculous. And I really think that in terms of public perception and willingness to tolerate this is going down, and their people's courage is increasing based on already the number of people who are speaking out about this, and our willingness to just say to the woke, like, call me whatever names you want, because we've had a couple of years of examples of pushback on this, and people are tired. So, I'm optimistic about the fall. I'm hoping that after the coalition, myself personally, that I can pull back from any kind of national organizing and then look towards school trustee elections, 3 years from now. Help to build some grassroots, help to build some local mailing lists, get parents engaged in some pushback, train people to, do delegations with the school board, start to do some digging locally. And I've talked with other local parent group organizers. We're trying to figure out how to scale that, how to give people a handbook, basically, and support them in organizing. This is one of the things that Conservatives at the federal level acknowledge openly that they do very poorly and have done poorly for quite a number of years, and that's to work with the grassroots, especially at the level of education. And there's a vacuum there. I suspect that as the winds change, that there's going to be there's going to be funding, there's going to be grants, there's going to be, donation, political, support for these kinds of groups and organizations that aren't there right now. And the funding on the other side of it is going to dry up. And that's going to shift the landscape tremendously. So I'm hopeful, and I'll see how this week shapes up and who we can get signed on, and possibly we can have between 25 and 50 groups from across the country, whether they're local parents groups or associations or national religious groups, sign on to the coalition, and then we go to the media and say, okay, look, we've got people all across the country. There's tens or hundreds of thousands. We're all concerned about this, and you need to take notice.
That's
whether legacy media will or not is a completely different story.
Well, there's enough media that will be interested in hearing about it. It doesn't have to be the mainstream media.
I hope
But yeah,
so.
that's super exciting. I didn't realize about Pierre Poilievre. I had a feeling it was him, but I didn't realize. That's awesome. I'm glad that you shared that.